broadcast, we are your hosts,
Zoe
and Olivia.
This week on Monday and Tuesday, juniors forecasting us due.
And this week on Wednesday from 7 to 9 p.m., the 17th annual Senior IB Extended Essay Showcase will be taking place.
Make sure to show up to support the hardworking IB students.
This weekend will be a 3-day weekend due to President's Day being on the 19th.
That's all for this week. Now on to winter sports.
Welcome back to your weekly sports update.
We are your hosts,
Sam
and Clyde.
This week on Monday the 9th, girls lacrosse starts their preseason.
Varsity boys wrestling will have a meet against Roosevelt on Wednesday the 11th.
Varsity boys basketball has a game at Jefferson this Friday.
And varsity girls basketball has a home game against Jefferson this Friday.
That's all for this week.
See you next week.
Over the past few months, the release of the Epstein files have made headlines time and time again, but who is Jeffery Epstein and what did the release of the files actually mean? Jeffery Epstein, born in 1953, is a well-known financier who was convicted of soliciting minor prostitution. Prior to creating his sex trafficking network, Epstein worked as a private school teacher teaching math and physics before joining Wall Street in 1976 and working for Bear Stearns. In 2005, a criminal case was opened in Florida by police after a 14-year-old girl's parents claimed Epstein paid for her massage. More allegations were collected of Epstein sexually abusing underage girls at his mansion. In 2008, Epstein pleaded guilty to charges of solicitation and prostitution, including minors, and was sentenced to 18 months, of which he served less than 13. In 2015, an accuser of Epstein sued one of his longtime confidants and associates for defamation. Jane Maxwell is a former British solicitor who helped facilitate Epstein's operations and abuse of underage girls. Maxwell is currently serving a 20-year prison sentence after being charged in 2021. In late 2018, Epstein's allegations resurfaced, resulting in his arrest on July 6, 2019. The Epstein files are a collection of documents that contain evidence of Epstein's sex trafficking operations in addition to his social networks and business transactions. After years of public pressure, President Donald J. Trump signed the Epstein Transparency Act on November 19, 2025. The Act states that all documents, records, and such related to the investigation of Epstein and Maxwell, with a few exceptions, must be publicly released within 30 days. The Act also states that the identities of suspected victims and documents, including photos and videos, must be redacted. The Act states that the names of public figures, high-profile individuals, and immunity deals may not be redacted to protect reputation. 500 lawyers were tasked with the redaction of the files. Despite the Transparency Act's regulations on redactions, since the release, there has been multiple accounts over and under redactions. The Department of Justice failed to meet the timeline set in the Transparency Act, though over 3 million pages, 2,000 videos, and 180,000 photos were released on January 30th, 2026. Prior to this release, only 500,000 files had been released. A spokesperson from the Department of Justice stated that only 0.1% of the files were unredacted, though this adds up to over 3,000 pages. Many public figures were mentioned in the files. However, it is important to note that this does not necessarily indicate any wrongdoing. High-profile public figures were mentioned in the files include Elon Musk, Bill Gates, President Donald J. Trump, former Prince Andrew and his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson, the Clintons, Steve Trish. Though the response to the release of the files is less intense than much of the public expected, there has been some significant events since the release. In response to the release of the files, Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson have lost their titles of Duke and Duchess of York. Co-owner of New York Giants Steve Trish is undergoing an investigation from the NFL. Both Clintons are identified in the files. Though they have previously denied visiting the island, they have now agreed to testify. President Donald J. Trump is one of the most prominent figures mentioned in the files. Reference to Trump is mentioned more times in the files than Jesus is mentioned in the Bible. Harry Potter's name is mentioned throughout the series, language is spoken, and more stars visible to the naked eye. The Epstein files shed light on the extent of Epstein's operations as well as the power held by those mentioned in the files.